This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I'm 70. I was born in 1941, and I couldn't have imagined when I was beginning to deal with my sexuality that it would ever be as open as it is now.
I remember the 1950s and the 1960s all too well, and as far as I'm concerned, that was a time when lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people did not exist. We were not in the newspapers, we were not in books, we were not in the movies, we were not on television. For all intents and purposes, we did not exist.
You didn't have Glee back then. You didn't have certain cultural aspects that we have today. You didn't have, rainbow flags hanging everywhere. It wasn't such a ingrained part of our culture that it is now, that gay definitely is a part of American culture.
I'm, an ordained United Methodist minister, and the United Methodist Church does not, the language is that they do not, that self-avowed practicing homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. So there are certain circumstances in the church that I have to be really careful about what I say and how I say it and to whom I say it to.
To watch Jerry lose custody of two beautiful children, not because she was abusive or there was anything that made her not fit as a mother, but because in the time that her ex was heterosexual. And he was a batterer, but he was heterosexual, and that made him a more proper parent than a mother who loved her children. And that was incredibly hurtful.
We're still second-class citizens. It's still hard to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender when you're a kid.
I mean, I think it'll be really interesting. We have all of these, radical roots of ranging from, Stonewall to now we have, more conservative organizations like the HRC. And it'll be interesting to see where our community, what direction it goes into.
When young people feel like they can be themselves at an earlier age, and that there's LGBT seniors that we can look to who've been in a relationship or had families or living various lives, I think it only gets better from here.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Gary Hawk, and it's my privilege to serve at Emory University as its Vice President and Deputy to the President. And I also have the honor this evening of bringing some words of greeting on behalf of the university, which is one of the partners in this evening's enterprise, and in particular paying tribute to one of the guiding lights of these CNN dialogues. Earlier this year, Emory's James Weldon Johnson Institute for the Study of Race and Difference teamed up with CNN and the National Center for Civil and Human Rights to launch the CNN Dialogues about major issues that define our times. One of the drivers of this initiative was Dr. Rudolph Byrd, who was for 20 years a chaired professor of African American Studies at Emory and the founding director of the Johnson Institute. We lost our good friend and colleague Rudolph earlier this fall on October 21st after a decade-long battle with multiple myeloma, but not before he had been able to participate in the first CNN Dialogues back in August and had known, although he was not able to be present firsthand, at the success of the second CNN Dialogues just a week and a half before his death. It's particularly appropriate for us to remember Rudolph briefly this evening before this third dialogue, because the topic for this evening's conversation was one that intensely and personally interested him. When he came to Emory in 1991 as Director of African American Studies, he may have been the only openly gay black man in America in such a prominent academic leadership position. That fact was certainly not one that defined all of who he was, but it does suggest the courageous voice that he used throughout his career as a scholar, a teacher, and a university citizen. And it also suggests the degree to which he was open to the otherness and the gifts of others, particularly to his colleagues and students. For he was tireless in his collaborations, helping to establish institutional partnerships between Emory and historically black colleges and universities, creating the Alice Walker Literary Society, serving on countless advisory boards, and finding time to edit books with Henry Louis Gates Jr. and others while writing and editing 8 books of his own. Beyond all these things, he dwelt among us with an enviable panache and sartorial elegance, accentuated by sophisticated bow ties and the classiest of footwear. He was always the best-dressed man on campus. At Emory's commencement in 2010, Rudolph Byrd received the Thomas Jefferson Award, which is the highest honor that Emory can bestow on a faculty member. It recognizes significant service to the university and the manifestation of those qualities of citizenship and high intelligence for which we remember Jefferson himself. In Professor Byrd's writing, teaching, community engagement, and generosity of spirit, he proved himself a nearly indispensable colleague and a very convivial companion indeed. We miss Rudolph Byrd deeply, but Emory is grateful that he and our alumnus, Doug Shipman, CEO of the Center for Civil and Human Rights, have been vitally engaged with CNN in bringing these dialogues to a broader audience. As a research university committed to the ancient legacy of liberal learning, Emory aims to nurture those qualities of Thomas Jefferson and Rudolph Byrd that are so necessary in the world today: critical thinking, effective communication, ethical commitment, and intercultural understanding. These are the qualities that mark the CNN dialogues as well. So on behalf of Emory, thank you, CNN, for helping to make this broader conversation possible. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator of this evening's event. I will not read the biography that is in your programs. I'll direct you to that. I know we want to get on with the program, so I will simply say that I was grateful when my wife Sarah introduced me to Jane Velez Mitchell by way of Nancy Grace's show many years ago. And it's been a personal pleasure to meet her tonight. And please help me in welcoming Jane Velez Mitchell.
Honored, and this is like a dream for me. If you had told me back in the day when I was in the closet struggling with my sexual orientation that one day I would be standing here as an out lesbian and a TV host moderating a discussion that's going to be heard and seen nationally about LGBT issues, I'd say you're dreaming. Well, guess what? My dreams came true, because here we are and I'm talking about it. And I'm out and I'm proud of you for being here. Whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whether you're bisexual, whether you're transgender, this is a dialogue that we can all learn from, because what's the point of life? We're here to find out who we really are and what our purpose is in life. And so this discussion about identity can help all of us. So with that, I want to welcome my absolutely incredible panel. We're having a great time backstage. By the way, we're all going karaokeing afterwards, and you're invited. All right. Got to know Donna Rose, who is a powerhouse, and she has done more to teach corporate America about transgender lifestyle, the transsexual lifestyle, and she has really changed the thinking of corporate America. And this is a woman of so many firsts. She was the first openly transgender member of HRC, that's Human Rights Campaign Board of Directors. She's the first openly transgender member of the Board of Directors for the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. First, and her memoir, Wrapped in Blue, is amazing. Let's welcome Donna Rose. Come on out, girl. All right, you're right there. All right, now, the next person who's coming out, you'll recognize him. You see him on TV all the time. He's a CNN contributor. He's a senior writer at ESPN, and he's been named Journalist of the Year by the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. And he's quite a speaker, let me tell you. We've been getting an earful backstage. He's actually been named one of the top 25 college speakers by Campus Pride, and he's won online journalism awards. He's basically given the LGBT opinion and put it into the media. Let's welcome LZ Granderson. All right, now, our next panelist is a mover and shaker in politics. You're going to meet Robin Brand, and we've been talking backstage. This woman knows her stuff. She knows every nuance of every LGBT issue. She should, because she's Deputy Executive Director of the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund and Leadership Institute, which is the largest LGBT PAC in the United States of America. So what this woman has done with her organization is find leaders in the LGBT community, train them, guide them, get them elected to public office, and then help them be effective. And we welcome Robin Brand. Come on out. And our final panelist needs absolutely no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway, just because we want to. You know him very well. He is an Olympic medal winner. He is 3-time U.S. champion, 2-time Olympian, world medalist, figure skater, and he's got his own hit show on the Logo Network. Be Good, Johnny Weir. Johnny Weir, the most addictive reality star on television. Woo! All right. So we're going to take our seats, and we're starting with the question that we're asking here today. The LGBT community has become more open. Has the openness led to acceptance, or has the acceptance led to openness? And I want to go around, and we'll round robin it. Why don't we start with you?
Well, it's an important question, because I think that the two are tied. You know, it's like, what's first, the robin or the egg? Chicken or the egg? Because it's one of those things where, when I was growing up, I never saw transsexual, transgender. I didn't even know what word to apply to how I felt, because none of the other words that I started to learn as I started to do more research made sense to me. So the fact of the matter is that when I finally came to grips with my unique life experience about a dozen years ago, it was because of the increased visibility of others who came before me, who provided that awareness. And I think that by sharing our stories, by humanizing ourselves, we are really integrating ourselves into society the way that we should. And that then provides more opportunity, but at the same time provides more challenge.
And you were telling me you were married, and a heterosexual married,
True.
And you had children.
I have a son.
You have a son.
Okay. I have a son. He's 26 going on like 12.
Congratulations. All right, LZ.
Boy, I was thinking about that as you were proposing the question. I can definitely say that I would not be where I am today had it not been for people before me who were courageous enough to tell their story. In fact, I remember I was out at this point, but I was still wrestling with loving sports because I didn't see a lot of figures in pop culture being openly gay and loving sports. And I remember walking into a bookstore, and this magazine doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Hero. And on the cover, you guys remember Hero magazine? And on the cover was a black guy, openly gay, holding a basketball. And I remember thinking, shit, that's not me. Who is that? Because I thought, up to this point, I thought I was the only gay black guy playing basketball. And so I bought the magazine, I read it. It gave me all this information about all these sports leagues that were filled with openly gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender athletes all around the country. And I had no idea. And so that actually began my journey into marrying who I was as an athlete and who I was as a gay person. And obviously now it's led me to ESPN. So I can definitely say that the more openness, if nothing else, had led to more information being shared, more conversations being had, and that leads to tolerance, and then tolerance would get to acceptance.
Rob?
Well, thanks. It is a great question, but I definitely land firmly on the openness leading to acceptance. And I have that opinion for a couple reasons based on my work experience working with LGBT candidates and the type of data we collect. For a long time now, it's been shown in polling that people who know someone who is openly gay is more open to LGBT issues, LGBT people. So the power of coming out and talking to your family, colleagues, etc., has a huge impact on how they view gay people and gay issues. And the other experience that I point to about the importance of openness is just the fact that not a single state has passed any type of relationship recognition bill without first having an open LGBT state legislator who's there to talk about their experiences and not only as policymakers but as people, as parents. And that type of interaction, that colleague-to-colleague interaction, has had a huge impact and openness on our ability to move more laws forward.
Johnny?
For me, I've always lived in kind of this little love bubble through my family and my friends. And, I came out wearing a rainbow from my mother into the receiving blanket. So I've never known anything different than that. I've never felt tortured. But as I got older, I understood that it wasn't really accepted publicly. It wasn't something that everyone wanted to be a part of. It was just something, it was your kind of cross to bear. And being a figure skater and competing against other people that are a lot less flamboyant than I am, I had to kind of dumb myself down in many ways to get ahead in sports. So I had to learn very quickly how to play the political game as well as what I wanted from my life. And, I've opened a lot of minds in this love bubble that I grew up in. I've opened my grandmother up to things that she never really thought she would be open to. And that's where I have a different opinion, because I kind of made this for myself. I made my own little world, and anybody that has a different opinion, it doesn't really affect me in any way, because I've only known love and acceptance for the most part. And, for me, looking at the vast majority of the world, it's not the same story. People aren't loved from the ground up for being different, or for me, just being me. But there are shows now like Modern Family that shows a very normal gay couple just living life, raising a child, having normal family dramas, and I think that's very important for the majority of Americans to see.
Exactly. And just for me, I was in the closet for many years to myself, and I'll never forget being at Sports Club LA on the treadmill and watching Ellen and that episode where she came out at the airport, remember, on the show? And something clicked in my head because I had grappled with it to the point where I had stuffed everything into my subconscious, and it would pop out occasionally. And nothing really happened in terms of me coming to terms with my sexual orientation until I got sober 16 years ago. But I remember that moment, and I knew it was a watershed moment, and I knew a door had opened. So I really feel that the courage of certain people like Ellen DeGeneres, who had the guts to do something that was a very risky thing career-wise at the time, has really changed the dynamic. And I feel that has led to a lot more acceptance and made it easier for people like me to come out. So let's get to some of the big issues. Marriage equality, I mean, that's the issue coast to coast that everybody is talking about. And we've got some amazing things that have happened. New York State, come on, it's legal. Oh, come on, you can clap over there. But then on the other coast, we got Prop 8, which is still up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen, Robin Brand. And then here's the thing that I love, the stat. I was reading, they gave me all these stats. The stat I love the most is that for the first time in U.S. history, more Americans favor gay marriage than are opposed to it. What do you guys think about that? Pretty cool. So where are we going, Robin, with gay marriage?
Well, we're moving in a lot of different directions. I think the news about public opinion is huge, and obviously, and been moving at a very quick trajectory over the last 20 years. And I just feel strongly that we've had wins and we've had losses over these last 15, 20 years, and even though we prefer the wins, the losses also help create a dialogue about our issues that we care about LGBT families and relationships and the legal protections we don't have. And so even though it seems almost contradictory to have the success in New York and California, which has a reputation of potentially even being sort of more liberal, still grappling with the issue of marriage, overall, I think the two situations have had an incredible impact on the shift in public opinion and changing hearts and minds and just providing time, even for a split second, for someone to see that news story, good or bad, and to reflect on what it means for our country is a positive thing for our community overall.
And you are now engaged, Johnny, and we have your fiancé. Stand up. Come on, take a bow.
Yeah.
So this is very personal for you. Marriage equality, personal.
Very personal, but I'm also the kind of person that, given equality or not, I still would have said, I'm marrying you and this is what's happening.
But I got to tell you, before there was any gay marriage approval anywhere, you could sort of say, I'd marry you if I could. But then now it's for real, sonny.
Yeah. That's
right. There's no way out. No, it's a very exciting thing, and it's relatively new. And Vita and I are super happy, and we're as normal as can be. I mean, I wash socks and cook dinner, and he goes to work.
And you skate.
And I skate and wear fabulous costumes. But, it's just a beautiful situation to be in and to be young and to be able to have the same rights as any other young person that I went to school with or he went to school with. It's extremely liberating that I can live the way I choose to.
Well, I know we have some folks in the audience that are leaders in the LGBT community, and I believe we have Jeff Graham, right? Jeff Graham, are you here? There you are, Jeff. You are the director of Georgia Equality, which is a powerhouse LGBT organization here, and you have a question.
Yeah, I sure do. And certainly as someone who's been in a relationship myself for 23 years, the issue of marriage equality is very personally important to me, as it is with the 900,000 other same-sex couples that we know exist in the country because of the census figures. But there are only 21 states that offer employment protections based on sexual orientation. There are only 17 states, and I'm including the District of Columbia as a state, that extend those same workplace protections to transgender individuals. There are 9 million people estimated to identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender in this country. Do you really think, given those facts and the political challenges in states like Georgia of trying to undo a constitutional amendment, that marriage equality should be our single focus, or should we really be focusing much more on workplace fairness around the country?
I think that there are several different ways you can think about what focus means, right? So if we have like our PACs, right, they can definitely strategize ways in which they believe, what can we get done first? What can we get done second? I think, but culturally, I think there's a different sort of focus. Mm-hmm. Culturally, we shouldn't just zone in on one topic. I think culturally, we should zone in on equality and what that definition means, and not be limited by what the politicians can do, but instead be focused in on what human beings should be doing, what we should be doing right now today. And so I would like to see our PACs work at issues that affect more people. I would agree with that sensibility, but I think it's also equally important that our media content and that our everyday lives reflect the general purpose of the PACs, and that is full equality for everyone. So I think that we are very capable of being multitask oriented. I don't think it has to be an either or situation. So I would like us to continue on the track that we're on. I agree with Johnny. I think that shows like Modern Family are extremely important. But I also will always tout to the day I die the importance of a character like Omar on The Wire, and how it's important that people in minority communities are reflected and see themselves in a variety of ways as well, to foster that conversation so that full equality remains to be the purpose.
Absolutely. And I have to say, researching the whole marriage equality issue, it's very complicated. It's like a three-dimensional chess game. You've got the states that are, more and more of them are now allowing gay marriage, but then you've got the federal government and the Defense of Marriage Act. And the Defense of Marriage Act essentially says, we don't recognize marriage between same-sex couples. So does that make the victories in the various states hollow, Robin?
Well, it does to a certain degree, in that, yes, you're still missing a lot of benefits by not having the federal protections or federal recognition of marriage. It's quite significant. That said, what the state laws do provide a lot of protections for families, and the wins around marriage have been a huge factor on getting public opinion where it is, I think, on marriage equality in general. And as I said before, the wins and the losses, I think, have gotten us to where we are now at 53% supporting marriage equality. So that's how, so I think back to the sort of marriage strategy, I do think that it's been critical in general in moving public opinion, but I also agree that we need to do a multi-tiered strategy. There's no reason why, and I know there's a lot of efforts to win non-discrimination protections at city levels, at county levels. I think that's a great strategy for convincing a state that the floor does not fall out when you provide protections to gay and lesbians in the workplace. So we still have a lot of work to be done, but I think, again, we all feel the momentum. We all want it now. We want full equality now, but I think we're being smart about the many ways in which we're approaching it.
And I just want to say, looking at this is so interesting because a friend of mine wanted to get married to a man. He's a man, and he wanted to marry a man from Britain, and he couldn't. Right. Now, if that had been a woman, she would have been able to come here and become a citizen. Mm-hmm. And he was explaining to me that no, because of the way it's written now, if he wants to marry somebody from another country, in that case England, he couldn't have him become an American citizen. Is that correct?
That's true. It's absolutely true. And I think it's interesting as we become more of a international world and businesses become more international. I personally am experiencing more and more people I know who are caught in that dynamic. In fact, I just was at a dinner party the other day where someone was getting ready to move to the Netherlands because there they recognize same-sex couples. His partner was from the Netherlands, and he was moving. He was a nurse. He was going to have to take his nurse's exam in Dutch in order to get licensed there. But I mean, that's the type of hoops people are jumping through in order to keep their marriages intact.
Let's talk about community building within the LGBT community, because I think some people might say, oh, we're just monolithic and it's all big, one happy family and we're partying all the time and dancing. But no, there are some issues. So, Donna Rose, do you feel as a transgender that there is discrimination and a transsexual within the LGBT community against transsexuals and transgenders?
Yes.
Why?
Because we still make people uncomfortable. I mean, it's an odd dynamic. But when we use this whole term about LGBT, as though we were one big happy family, and we're really not. There are many, many trans people who feel that our rights, our pathway to equality is not the same as the LGBT pathway to equality, and that focusing so much on marriage equality takes away from the fact that we get fired every day. That 41% of us, based on the study that just came out through the task force and NCTE last year, are attempting suicide and making it through the day to an unbearably difficult thing. And so socially and culturally, when we start talking about, what as a trans person, I mean, I'm a cynic at heart, and sometimes I kind of half joke that why ruin a good relationship with a marriage? But at the same time, we look at what's happening and the whole incremental kind of approach that seems to happen politically, and there is a lot of discomfort. Myself, I was attracted to women before. I haven't changed, so now I had someone say, so now you're a lesbian. I said, I consider myself a situational lesbian because I haven't changed, but
they had a theme like that on the L Word. I saw.
But we haven't had our Will and Grace moment. We haven't had our moment culturally. We're still battling a crazy show on NBC that's coming out now where they've got two guys who are in dresses standing up against a urinal and kind of throwing us back to decade-old stereotypes of where we've come from and what gets thrown back against us when we're trying to fight for workplace discrimination. So we're like at the Stone Ages when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And I've heard a number of things tonight already that I find fascinating. When you introduced me, you mentioned the transgender lifestyle. I don't even know what a transgender lifestyle is.
Neither do I.
Because I'm just like you. I have a career. I have a son. I pay my bills. I don't know what a lifestyle is, and I've noted more than once where we talk about gays and lesbians, but we leave out transgender people, or we talk about gay, but we don't say. And so I'm very sensitive. We are very sensitive to being left out of the party or not considered real men or women, or somehow or another we haven't paid our dues yet. And so there is very much, as I've been the first of my community in the various things I've done, there's been a significant learning curve. I'll just give an example. When I was on the board of HRC, at the first meeting, they come out with statistics of how we're broken out. I mean, how many men and women, how many by race, all kinds of things. And when I joined the board, they had men, women, then transgender. And I wrote back, I said, I assume this makes sense to you, but what I read are men, women, and other. And I'm not an other. I mean, I've gone through an incredibly difficult process to integrate into society and in a role that makes me comfortable. And for you now to do this, shows an insensitivity, a sense of being unaware. And I know it wasn't on purpose, but that's kind of what we're doing. That's kind of why we're having these kinds of conversations.
Well, I just want to say that I think you're an individual human being of incredible courage. And I think most of our audience sort of is. I want to talk about, well, as a lesbian, I'd personally like to say my issue is when I go to all these galas and events, I want to see more women. Okay? It's all guys. It's a you-know-what fest, so I won't say the word. Okay. LZ, what about bisexuals? It's LGBT. Bisexuals are there, but they're sort of voiceless in a sense, and sometimes they're regarded as sort of party crashers. What's your take on that? I want to make light of it. I want to be serious for a second. Now that I've made my jokes, I can get serious.
I think it's just an extension of just basic prejudice to begin with, right? When you're not exposed to something, then you start making assumptions to fill in those gaps. We've seen this along the path of every single significant social movement there's been in this country, whether it's dealing with women, whether it's dealing with religion, whether it's dealing with race, social economics. So it's quite natural that we will have a segment of the LGBT community that looks at B and start making assumptions because we haven't really gotten the information or been exposed to enough people who are bisexual, who identify as bisexual, to understand fully and accept fully what that means. I know that there are quite a few, and maybe some are here in this audience, that assumes that you're not really a bisexual man, you're just somebody who hasn't fully accepted who you are yet. And if you listen to that in the way that it's being said, how is that different than 30 years ago to what that was being said to men by other men because you were attracted to men and not women? Mm-hmm. You haven't figured yourself out yet. It's the exact same conversation. So each time that we get these beautiful moments like here, in which we get to see a mirror and say, you know what, we're diverse, but we don't fully understand diversity yet. We expect tolerance, but we don't know fully what it means to be tolerant yet. We as a community still needs to grow as well. And if we come from that level of humbleness, then we will find the humbleness that it would take to get the larger community to understand our plight as well. Gut checking is what it's all about.
I think the bigger issue is that sexuality is complicated. And you can't put it in 4 little boxes or 2 little boxes.
I will tell you this, though, about sexuality. When I
tell me, I want to know.
Since we're talking about sexuality, when you come out, right, you for me anyway, and I suspect for a lot of us, you start to do some introspection, right? You look back in your life, you try to figure out, was that what I thought it was that? And so I can remember never missing an episode of Dukes of Hazzard. Never. And I thought it was because I just loved the show, and I knew the song, and I just thought it was like a great show. And then later I realized how silly it was for a black man to be rooting for Confederate flag. And I go through all of that, right? And then I realized, I think in my late 20s, which was 2 days ago, that I thought Luke Duke was hot.
Yeah.
I was into Luke Duke, and then I started looking at the guys I dated. They all freaking look like Luke Duke. There you go. And the guy I'm with now, freaking Luke Duke. Hairy chest, hairy arms, tight jeans. I'm just like, since I was a kid, this is what I wanted. And it just took a while for me to get the language to properly express it. So it's complicated.
So what you're saying is you have a type.
I gotta have a type.
And I think it's interesting because I've always noticed it's so fascinating that obviously the majority of the people who buy certain magazines are women. And who's on the cover? Beautiful women in very sexy poses. What's that about? I don't have the answer, but I think it's an interesting question. All right, we've got somebody else, a community leader in the audience, Paulina Hernandez, and she's the co-director of Southerners on New Ground. And Paulina is a very, very big force in her own right. This Atlanta-based organization works to resolve racial and economic injustices within the LGBT community in the southern region. So your question.
Thank you. One of the questions that I wanted to pose is that we know that a lot of the LGBT folks of color that we work with, we know that a lot of one of the things that we see oftentimes is that a lot of studies show that our folks are taking home a lot less money than both our straight counterparts as well as LGBT white folks. And so one of the questions that I have is how do we bridge the gap around some of the civil rights organizing and racial and economic justice organizing that's being done in the U.S. to also embrace the fact that a lot of our folks are facing some of the exact same economic and racial conditions, as well as feeling like they're not represented by the LGBT mainstream agenda that focuses on equality versus justice.
Well, I think it's an excellent question, Robin.
No, I mean, it is an excellent question, and one it's complicated, I feel, and I wish I had an easy answer, but it's certainly something we at our organization are constantly trying to work on. Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I think we have to just have more shared experiences. I think, for example, we've started to really cross-network with other organizations, so we bring openly LGBT, Latino, and Latina leaders to the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO. So then we kind of are cross-issuing Latino issues and LGBT issues, so we're creating a dialogue around shared interests and shared concerns. I think we need to do more of that, of sort of, and I think it has to be very authentic. I mean, you have to have, it has to be a give and take, right? I mean, and that's what we found, that those types of forums are a good place to do that. I also feel like it's really important to continue to make sure that our organizations, LGBT organizations, and likewise economic justice organizations, have diverse leadership and staff, and so that internally they're getting different perspectives and ideas. So those are the two experiences I have that seem to be working in that direction.
Well, I want to move on to a related topic, and that's workplace inclusion. And I saw a lot of stats when I was researching coming here, and the one that I think disturbed me the most is that 48%, almost half of all LGBT employees in the United States are closeted at work. That's disturbing to me. That's rough. I think that's a very disturbing statistic, and I don't know exactly where it comes from or what we can do about it. But I want to ask you, Johnny, you're in sports. You've dealt with, you said that you were, we think of bullying as a school issue, but that you were bullied in your workplace, which is the sports arena, essentially.
Tell
us about that. Yeah.
No, in the last Olympics, I skated the performances of my life and felt so amazing. And then the next morning, there was this report that came from Montreal, and it was basically saying that I was too gay. I was too woman-like. I needed to have a gender test to be sure that I was actually competing in the proper division of figure skating. And of course, tough as nails. So, my manager, my manager actually had more of an issue with it than I did. I was like, oh, that's, fine. They speak French. I don't understand that. It was a really strange situation, and it got played everywhere all of a sudden. And it was the day after the Olympics, the most amazing day of my life. And then I had to kind of defend the fact that I had a penis. And it just seemed absolutely silly. And in that way, it's total bullying. It's total unacceptance of everything that I represent. I want to be judged for who Johnny Weir is, not what things I was born with, not what makes me up. I want to make something of myself, and I did that on the ice at the Olympics on the biggest stage in sports. And it was definitely hurtful on a personal level because I love my penis. But more so, it hurt me that there were kids that watch the Olympics with their families every night in the winter, and they have hot cocoa, and they're sitting there watching this, and there are kids that, are gay or different or, transgender or lesbian. I mean, whatever words we can throw at it. There are kids that are different. And their parents are going to see this report about me and be like, that's my kid. We're going to stifle that. We're going to push that down because look how badly he's getting made fun of. So my stance was to, call a press conference and to show support, because I've never had a hard time with the people in my life, with my family. So in that way, I wanted all mothers and fathers to see that I was completely normal and they should raise their kids just the same. So being bullied in the workplace led me to accept it and move on, and in my own small way, try to help other people not to be bullied. I'm more than happy to kind of bear the brunt of what I can for the community to help kids that grow up and don't have the same situation that I had.
Well, what strikes me about being in the closet at work is that you're not just in the closet at work. Even if you're out to one-third are out to their friends and family, but in the closet at work. But if you're in the closet at work, Donna, you can't go to the gay pride parade because somebody from work might see you. So really, once somebody described to me being in the closet as living in a vertical casket, and I thought that was the best description I had ever heard. So it's a slightly larger casket, but if you're in the closet at work, are you still in a casket?
Sometimes, but even sometimes when you're not in the closet at work, you're still in the casket. It's one of these things where I think corporate culture has has really changed a lot of what we're talking about. When I first got involved in activism, because I didn't want to be an activist, I didn't do this to be an activist. I was naive at the very beginning. One of the things that, we're talking statistics, a recent statistic is that 78% of Americans think it's illegal to fire someone over their sexual orientation or their gender identity. I mean, there's a significant number of people in this country who are as naive as I was to believe that what you're taught from a young age, liberty and justice for all, that you're judged based on what you do, not who you are. But for those of us who have seen friends get fired and bad things happen, it's a scary thing. But I will say, though, that for years and years and years, when I first got involved, I learned that there were places where you'll meet somebody different from you. Typically speaking, we hang out with people who look like us, who speak like us, who are the same color as us. I mean, if you look at your communities, it's a kind of a fascinating thing, but you don't get to choose those things at work. So by being out, you do put that face to being different, whether it's LGBT, whether it's some other ethnicity, whether it's any other number of other things, flavors of different. And so corporate America, I learned, early on that there was a business case, that it's not just about doing the right thing. There's money, and that there's talent, and that there's a reason for benefits and for acceptance and for some of the education and the things that are happening in corporate America.
Yeah, and I think if you're in the closet at work, I would think that, and I was in the closet, but when I was so in the closet, I was in the closet to myself at the same time, and being the addict person I am, and in recovery, my addict personality, once I came out, I came way out. So I didn't know how to do it, thank God, in a halfway. I had to do it all the way. But I would think that being in the closet at work would feel alienated, because people sit around and go, well, what did you do this weekend? And then you have to use that neutral gender, and you have to kind of lie by omission, essentially. And so there's a saying in 12-step, you're only as sick as your secrets. I mean, if you have to walk around carrying a secret, that's not healthy. Rob, very quickly.
Well, I would say, first of all, we heard earlier that there's still practically 2/3 of our states do not have protections for people and job protection. Yeah. So, there's a real reason people aren't coming out at work, because they can't. They'll be fired. And the other thing I would add, too, is that coming out is still sort of an activist type of experience. Some people, it happens very naturally. You're like this leader. You don't even know you're doing what you're doing for the world, like Johnny's done. And others, you really feel it when it's happening. But it is an act of empowerment, and it's a political act. And the gay community is no different than the rest of the community in many ways. Only 50% of people in the United States are registered to vote. So people participate at different levels, and the gay community is no different.
Absolutely, and I hear you, and that's a very good point. And I just want to say that of my 3 miracles in my life, getting sober and going vegan is another one, and coming out, that is a miracle in my life, and I'm so glad that I came out all the way. I want to go to somebody who's in the audience, another leader in the community, Angela Brown, and she is also a youth advocate who has served the Atlanta area and done incredibly important work for 2 decades, more than 2 decades. Your question.
Good evening. Thank you so much. I'm also Reverend Angela Brown, and I also would like to say that how incredibly important what we're doing here tonight is. I just finished running for the Atlanta Public School Board of Education, and one of the major issues in that race became bullying and the fact that I supported young people however they come to us, and I was persecuted for that. But nonetheless, my question tonight was, is, workplace inclusion embraces a cooperative and supportive work environment that recognizes the values of our differences. How do we actually manage, in real terms, workplace inclusion in our schools, in our offices, religious institutions, and etc.? How do we really manage it?
Elsie?
What do you mean by manage? You mean, would you elaborate a little bit for me?
Sure.
Are you got dreads, by the way?
I do.
Go ahead, girl.
I love yours too.
Sorry, it's a dread thing.
It is. You wouldn't understand. Couldn't resist that. Well, it's easy to talk about being inclusive and having these workplaces or being in schools or talking about bullying. But the reality is that a lot of us don't really know how we can manage being inclusive, whether it's wherever we are, whether it's in our schools or our churches, our synagogues. But how do we actually concretely, if you all have examples of how to manage being inclusive? I know that you've spent a lot of time working on those kinds of issues. And so what would you say to the community, even managers, on how to be, in the 90s, it was about being diverse. We needed diversity in our workplaces. Now we talk about being inclusive in our workplaces. And so how do you really manage those issues?
Gotcha. I think what the example you brought up is paramount to the overall conversation, because we were focused in on diversity, which we only observe for the most part as a human resources sort of checkbox sort of thing. Got some women, got some men, got one gay person, blah, blah, blah. The inclusion element, trying to get people to understand that it's not about the external that we're trying to bring together, but about the experiences and how we can tap into those experiences to benefit the whole. I assisted ESPN in establishing our employee resource groups. And one of the things that we stressed to the teams that we're setting up was that in order for this to be successful, you cannot focus in on the fact that you're black or the fact that you're a woman or this or that. You need to focus in on the experiences and how this company can tap into those experiences to be a better company, to monetize those experiences if need be, and use you as a resource so that we don't have missteps. When it comes to schools, I think that's very similar. It's not necessarily about having a GSA, a gay straight alliance in the schools, just so you can say that gay and straight people get along, but it's about an exchange of experiences so that the overall education is enhanced. We have to find ways to communicate that it's not just about checking boxes, but it's about exchanging thoughts and ideas. I think if you can get your head team to see that and not to be so focused in on just making sure HR is satisfied, but seeing that it really is paramount for the overall success of whatever unit they're overseeing, then the middle managements will see it, and then the people who work for them or the students will see that I'm valued for who I am. Because ultimately that's what inclusion is about. It's about saying, yeah, you're a part of the team, as opposed to, yeah, you're a part of the team.
One of the biggest issues in the LGBT community right now is teen bullying, and specifically bullying of kids who are gay or perceived as gay. You had spoken, Johnny, that you were bullied in school. We're seeing some real tragedies now, and I don't know if we're just learning more about it because they're in the news media more and they've always gone on, or it's increasing, and it's something I'd like everybody to weigh in on. We've had this Tyler Clemente incident where he was photographed, videotaped in a same-sex encounter, and then he committed suicide and jumped off a bridge. We're seeing some really horrific effects of teen bullying. What did you experience, and what should we do about it?
For me, I grew up in a very small, 99.8% Caucasian Christian community in the middle of Pennsylvania with buggies, Amish. And when I started to figure skate, I moved to the bustling metropolis of Newark, Delaware, which it was, for me, it was culture shock. I met my first Jewish person. I met my first African American person. I met my first Asian American. And it was just shocking to me that there were so many different people out there. And I always fit in. I was the weird kid, but I was still cool and everyone talked to me. But when I went to Newark, Delaware, where all of these different people were, I all of a sudden felt that I too was very different. I felt that there was nothing I could do. I was just different. I remember walking down the hallways and people singing songs, whether it was you know, the little white girl I sat next to in science, or, you know, the 6-foot-tall African-American guy that was just very aggressive, and, you know, his pants were sagged and he had the big leather coat on. And to me, that was very aggressive because I hadn't been exposed to that. Singing songs about, you know, gay things, or, you know, calling me a faggot, or whatever, about how all fags should die, and things like that, especially when you are as coming from such a puritanical place as where I come from. It was just so shocking, and I would run to whatever my next class was. I never walked down the hall. I always ran because I was afraid of what might happen, who might push me, who might try and touch me, who would try and mess with my life. And luckily for me, I have a very strong defense mechanism, and I could use that to make me stronger. I could use people hating me for being different and for being myself. I could use that hatred and channel it in a good way. And seeing what's going on with so many kids out there, I wish I could just give them that mechanism that I learned to grow, and probably from over-supportive parents that I had, constantly coddling me. I always felt that I was the best. But I wish I could impart that little atom or that cell onto these kids, because it's heartbreaking. It's seriously heartbreaking that people feel like there's no other way than to kill themselves. I don't have an experience where I was in that position, but all I can say to people is let it help you. Help make yourself stronger. Believe in yourself. Be an army inside your one body, and march on. That's all I can do, as I haven't been there and I don't understand being at that point where you feel like there's no way out.
Johnny, you kind of touched on this already, and I'm glad that you did. But what I wanted to say was that a recent and popular dialogue surrounding LGBT youth offers the hopeful message that it gets better. Unfortunately, this is not the case for everyone, and many individuals cannot simply wait for their conditions to improve. How would you encourage students facing bullying and harassment in school to take advantage of the resources available, and what can strong, empowered individuals like all of you do to directly impact those students?
Well, I just want to say one quick thing in researching this. It seems like there's a patchwork quilt of responses across the country. And Anderson Cooper just did the story about how in Hennepin County, Minnesota, there's a policy of neutrality towards sexual orientation. And so some people are calling it a gag policy. The teachers are seeing bullying, gay bullying, anti-gay bullying, and they feel that they can't say anything because of this neutrality policy. How do we deal with this patchwork? How do we get a universal system to combat this? Robin?
Well,
Make it fast.
Solve it now.
I'm hardly an expert on this issue, but I'm encouraged to see that it seems like some of the bills recently, New Jersey's law, are getting more sophisticated. They're actually funding these anti-bullying laws, which I understand is often a problem, that the laws will be passed, but there's no funds to actually create the dialogues and create the type of climate change that needs to happen to really, get the bullying out of the schools and probably to educate the teachers. So I think there's that piece of it, but I am encouraged to see better laws being passed, like the one in New Jersey, which my understanding is that any bullying that happens has to be reported to a state collection bank, which is pretty powerful. And so I think it's about collecting data. I think it's about educating our legislators, and I think it's about sharing best practices about what is working around the country. And that is happening, and it's already having an impact, and we just have to continue to do that.
And I think that, unfortunately, what I've read some of the stories, and we cover them all the time on my show, these tragic stories, is sometimes the kids aren't even out to their parents. So that's a catch-22, because they can't go to their parents, Donna, and say, I'm being bullied, because they haven't told them what's going on in their lives. And if the parents have expressed something that's homophobic, that would certainly discourage the child from being honest. So, briefly, what do you see there in that dynamic?
Well, are you okay?
Somebody's getting bullied back there. Okay, go ahead.
That's a tough question. It's What I can say is that if you ever want to be humbled, go to a youth center. Because we talk about resiliency, we talk about courage, and we talk about in the workplace, or we talk about as being an adult. But when you see these kids who are kicked out by their family, when you look at statistics, one of the statistics that breaks my heart is the average age of a homeless trans kid is 13 and a half. 13 and a half. Can you imagine being kicked out of your house? And that's even increasing now that the economy being what it is. So LGBT kids are at risk in horrific ways. But if you go to an LGBT center, and oftentimes they're funded or they're started locally by champions, and they help to facilitate gay-straight alliances, which then go and help to build the ally base, because we can't do this alone. We live in a culture that somehow thinks it's okay to call somebody a fag, or someone to say that that's somehow funny, or if you hear it, you don't say something. I remember there's a quote that I really love that says, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And none of us can afford to do nothing for our kids and for their kids.
It's this "that's so gay," that phrase that is so hurtful, and yet it's bandied about, LZ. Like, oh, there's nothing to that. And there's even been debates over movies and movie trailers, including that. When are we going to get to the point where saying something homophobic is akin to saying something racist?
Well, shit, girl, we're saying stuff racist now. We're still there. We haven't even got past that hurdle yet. If you listen to some of the GOP debates being led by Herman Cain, we're still trying to figure out how to talk to each other, sensibly within race and still sensibly, between genders. And so I see the conversation about LGBT defamatory language as just a part of our culture's slow evolution and understanding that if we respect each other, we can get a lot more done than antagonize each other. I think that it's very easy sometimes, because we've got the NAACP over here, and we got now over here, and we got like HRC over here, to see our issues as somehow separate. They're really all part of the same thing: ignorance, insensitivity, intolerance. And so, I don't think there'll ever be a bridge that'll link everybody to fully know how to attack it collectively. But I think it's important that we know what the actual enemy is. So if you're involved with one organization that's dealing with women's issues, if you hear someone say something racist, issue a public statement saying, we don't support that. Don't say that's for the black people to handle. Mm-hmm. Say that's wrong for our society. Absolutely. If you're in the business of fighting for justice, then be in the business for fighting for justice. Not just your justice, but justice. That's how we do it.
Absolutely. Which brings us to perhaps the most challenging discussion point, and that is religion and the LGBT community. Because when I saw this topic, I was like, you really want to talk about religion? Because they always say, don't talk religion or politics at the dinner table. I was given a list of many different subsets of many different religions and denominations that have organizations that are very inclusive. And I can't read them all, but that's very good news. But on the other side, you have the fact that religious organizations were very much behind Prop 8, the ban on gay marriage in California, and that a lot of the money came from the Mormon community. Additionally, when you look at the battle over gay marriage in New York State, which was won, and now it's legal, I just quote from the New York Catholic bishops that after it was approved, they said, the passage by the legislature of a bill to alter radically and forever humanity's historic understanding of marriage leaves us deeply disappointed and troubled, the bishops said. How do you negotiate religion and what the LGBT community is seeking, Rob?
Well, I think what I have experienced, which I think is significant, is that the religious leadership is often out of step with the rank and file Catholics or whatever religion you're looking at. Because,
fabulous shoes.
Excuse me?
The Pope has fabulous shoes.
But I guess I'll use, for example, I mean, I think New York would be a great example of that. Rhode Island, for sure, that just passed civil unions. Very strong, one of the most, I think, the most Catholic state in the country, actually. We've done polling there that shows that I forget exactly, but it was like something like 67% of Catholics in that, self-identified Catholics, supported marriage equality. Completely in contradiction to what their leadership was saying. So I think that's a very important fact for us to remember. That said, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
Well, why don't we go to somebody in the audience who can certainly speak to this issue, and we've got Dennis Meredith. He is the senior pastor at the Tabernacle Baptist Church. And Dennis Meredith is an openly gay and bisexual minister. He is senior pastor at Tabernacle Baptist Church in Atlanta, and he preaches against homophobia and founded the Stop Hate campaign. Well, there you go.
Thank you. As you said, I do pastor and openly. I'm open. I came out to my congregation 3 years ago, when I was 57 years old.
Yeah.
And at the time I came out as gay bisexual, but I'm gay. Here's my partner with me here tonight. So let me set the record straight. And at the time I was married, and so anyway, it's complicated, but nonetheless. My question tonight is, in the way we're framing, even the way you kind of backed off, there's always this kind of fear and intimidation when it comes to the discussions around religion, as though it's off limits to talk about, like God is going to get us if we say the wrong thing. And so my question tonight is, there are so many people of faith with all of the openness and the affirming information that's out there. There's still so many people of faith who attend mainline churches that still teach you should hate who you are. And it's kind of like, how do we get them to understand that it's not acceptable to give your tithe to a church and a pastor who tells you that you are a mistake?
Well, when I was on the board of HRC, one of the things that we identified, because typically the organization is perceived as a political organization, but moving the cultural needle isn't just a political debate. And we recognized early on that having those spiritual discussions, those religious discussions, was something that too often we conceded. And as a result, we found ourselves either on the defensive or just accepting what we were told. And what we did at the time was we started a religion and faith program, because it's come up several times tonight. When we talk about schools or youth, or we talk about workplaces, or we talk about communities in general, how do we provide the tools to these communities to empower themselves? And that comes from within, because that argument is something that one pastor has to have to another pastor, to be able to be that other voice, to be able to point out with that level of credibility that's not the only way, that there are other options, there are other interpretations, and that those kinds of opportunities are available. Because I can speak for myself that my spiritual self has never been more alive than when I finally accepted me for me. And the thing is that helping others celebrate themselves is a hard thing to do. So what I really believe is that we have to, as communities, arm one another with, empower one another. I wouldn't say arm one another. to have those conversations amongst ourselves, because that's where we're going to gain the ground that needs to be gained in order to be able to let people be aware of what's available.
But John, I think if I think about it, it's the ultimate question is, how do you combat when you perceive of religion being used as a cover for bigotry and hatred?
How do you comment? Well, I guess big in the marriage fight, a big shift was using the word civil marriage, and creating distinctions between religious marriage and civil marriage, and it's the type of terminology we use in terms of helping people make the distinction about this is about laws and protections for people and their families, and it's not in a religious context. It can be if you choose it to be, but in general, these are laws that we all are entitled to. So I think it's the language you use and trying to help make those distinctions fit for people, because it has kind of gotten all looped up into into a more religious dialogue, although I think we've done a good job of starting to separate that.
Well, I think that's why laws are so important, because one of the reasons people don't want to talk about religion is that it's a belief. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that set of beliefs, you don't feel you can argue with somebody about their beliefs, but yet laws are laws, and laws have to be obeyed. And that's why laws are so important, Elsie.
Well, I was going to say, some of the things that I like writing about for CNN.com is the intersection of religion and LGBT issues. And the reason why I enjoy doing that, one, Pastor, I actually was a youth pastor at 2 different churches, non-denomination and as well as a Methodist church in my heterosexual days. I carried the religious information with me to my gay days. I was a spy, if you will. But I enjoyed that conversation because I feel that if you equip yourself with the information, then you don't feel intimidated when you're confronted with someone who says, this is my belief. So what I enjoy doing is actually not saying what you believe is wrong, but just inquiring, why do you believe what you believe? And how did you get to that particular place? I remember having a conversation that lasted almost a week with a reader, and he did not know about King Arthur VIII. He didn't know. And I was like, dude, he killed like one of his wives because she wasn't bearing no children. And he he said, translate the Bible. That dude, the one that killed his wife because she wasn't having any babies. He said, translate the Bible. Where did you get that from? I don't know, history. So when you help people connect dots like that and engage them and not necessarily be intimidated or run from the conversation, you become empowered. And that's what information, that's what knowledge does, it empowers you. So I'm happy to have the conversation with any religious figure. I remember being a kid in Detroit, my mama used to make us hold our breaths and be still when Jehovah's Witnesses were knocking at the door. And I was like, when they knock at the door, stop, don't move. And I remember thinking, this is our house. What the hell is wrong with you? Just open the door and talk to the people, nothing's going to happen, so.
Well, while we're revealing things, I had a relationship with a woman where I couldn't meet her mother because her mother had religious beliefs that were not negotiable, and that was it. I wouldn't be able to meet her. I was going to come as a UPS delivery woman. I'd like you to sign something and have my headshot in there. But no, we nixed that idea. But no, again, religion is a tough one. But this is I think this final subject that we're going to talk about before we get to the questions, which are going to be a lot of fun, is I think really the heart of the matter, and that is how to lead an authentic life. And I've always felt that life was a journey of self-discovery, and that we're here to find out who we are and what our purpose is. What are we here to accomplish, and how can we be of service to the rest of the world? So how important is it, and how did each of you get to live an authentic life? I documented my coming out story in my autobiography. I know you've written an autobiography, a memoir of your coming out. We could all probably go on for hours about that very long, extended, painful process, but could you break it down in a short amount of time, your journey to an authentic self?
Yeah. When I finally stopped being afraid, there's another quote I like, and it seems like we try to reinvent the wheel, but it's a quote that says, "Courage isn't the absence of fear; it's recognition that something else is more important than fear." And so when people talk about what I've done, and I'm talking about me as Donna, as a transsexual woman, as a transgender person, I have no problem with any of those labels, and I'm perfectly comfortable with any number of other things. The thing is that I've finally become who I was meant to be, and that's not saying in terms of my body or in terms of how I look or how I dress or how I act. It's in terms of how I feel at the end of the day when I look in the mirror. And I think about my dad, who passed away a dozen years ago, and all that he instilled in me about living life while you can and not being afraid. So I think what we're talking about here is empowering other people to be who they are and not to see the same barriers of LGBT, LMNOPQ, black, white, all is to embrace your wholeness, whatever that is in your world. And it's a shifting, changing thing. But once you can do that, once you can ask difficult questions, once you're not constrained by your own fears and limitations, it becomes an incredibly empowering opportunity to finally live instead of just enduring life.
Well said. That's a hard act to follow, but I'm sure you can, Jose.
No, skip me. That was too hard. Give me something easy. For me, I'll just say real quick, my ex-wife was and still is fine. Like, she's like Beyonce fine. And I'm just ashamed to say that. She's gorgeous. Most gorgeous girl in high school. We're high school sweethearts. And, I was married to her. She was pregnant. I was a youth pastor. We were driving a group of kids to go see Jars of Clay. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm gay. Like, something about this picture-perfect story just isn't quite right. And so when I finally came out and went through the painful process of getting a divorce and helping my ex-wife through the journey as well, letting her also know that she did nothing wrong, that this was about my cowardness, and this was about me incorporating you into my journey in an unfair way and helping her process and get to where she needed to be to move on. I started to go down the path of work, and I looked at the office, and I knew right away I was going to be out because I had a beautiful little boy, had a gorgeous wife, had been a youth pastor in the church, and I couldn't do that lie. So I definitely wasn't going to do the lie for a bunch of folks I didn't know. I wasn't going to do the lie for like a boss or a job because I had the perfect life, but it wasn't. So I'm not going to go back in the closet for strangers. So that's how I got to the peace I have.
It's interesting, all these different stories, but I just was closeted in high school and college, and for me it was largely, I like to think, because I was in sports and it wasn't very accepted in the sports teams being gay. I felt like I couldn't be a team leader. I clearly did not have the same confidence as Johnny, and neither did I make it anywhere close to the Olympics. But anyway, but I did. Ultimately, I think it just became too painful for myself and my family. I was outed by my partner's sister. I think because they were as disturbed as I was, and so I was outed. And just once you're out, there's no looking back. And thank God she did that.
Whenever I talk about this, I almost feel bad that I didn't struggle more. I feel like somebody should have, had an issue with me. But
don't feel bad. You can have some of my struggle.
Fine, I'll take it. But for me, just the affirmation of having two strong, individualistic parents that let me shoot for the stars was the moment. Me, 6 years old, realizing that Richard Gere did a little bit too much for me watching Pretty Woman. Way more than Julia Roberts did. And then being kind of like, all right, go play with flowers. Like, that was the moment where I felt like I could do no wrong, and I felt like my family accepted me, the people that loved me unconditionally, that needed to. They loved me no matter what. And from there, I could just fly and grow and do anything and everything that I wanted to. So for me, coming out, I've come out to one person officially. That was my mother, because I was like, well, when you turn 18, you'll be an adult, and you may as well tell the old bird, like, what's going on. So I told her, just because I felt like, from inside the gay community, I was like, everyone else is coming out, and they're telling me that I have to. So I did one time just to try it, and there were no real fireworks. It wasn't a big shock to anybody. So, I mean, I've grown up in a community and in a family where I've only been taught to love myself for everything that I'm good at and everything I'm bad at. So that's been the biggest strength that I've been able to get.
Wow, those are incredible stories. Just to add a personal note, I struggled with my sexual orientation for a long time. I also was married, and I'm still very good friends with my ex-husband, and I also had a long-term boyfriend, and I'm very good friends with him. And I'm a recovering alcoholic. When I was a drunk, I could drink down my unpleasant feelings, my uncomfortable longings for the same sex. And anytime I had those feelings, I would say, waiter, another glass of Chardonnay. And then when I got sober, I had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. I had to face myself, and I surrendered to my truth, and thank God. It's been, I can't tell you how much happier I am. And a lot of people think about sexual orientation, about sex. It's really about your identity, who you are, feeling comfortable in your own skin. And I could say that it was all worth it just to be able to sit here and say, here's who I am, this is me, take me or leave me. That's like such a gift to be able to do that and not have a facade and not pretend and not be a phony. For me, that is the gift. It's being honest. So, wow. Living an authentic life, we have another extraordinary person here, Cindy Abel. And she's a filmmaker and a former Georgia Equality executive. And she also has a question for us on this very same subject.
Thank you, Jane. It's really interesting to me to listen to this conversation about openness and acceptance. And then as you asked each of the panelists about living authentically, what that means to them, it was curious to me that everyone described their coming out process and viewed it that way. And as we've been working on a film over the course of the past year, interviewing LGBT folks endorsed by the Victory Fund, and as a way of showcasing role models that it is possible to be completely open about being LGBT and also have authentic and very fulfilled lives. But in that process, we've also met a lot of people, young people in rural areas or people who are going to jobs every day, who, as Robin said, half of them could get fired just for simply being LGBT. What does it mean for them to live an authentic life? When they're putting their physical life and their professional life on the line, it's very easy for all of us. I live in Midtown, so it's a piece of cake. But what about for the rest of the world who lives outside of those kind of environments?
Well, I'd like to throw that to Donna, because I think you could address that.
One of the things that I've learned over the years is that my parents knew more than I gave them credit for. They're not as stupid as I thought, especially now as a parent. And the other one was that Psych 101 was probably the most important course that I took. And not because it taught me how to live or how to be, but the Maslow and the hierarchy of needs was a framework that I was able to apply to life. And that if because we talk about things that are compartmentalized, whether it's our career or our spiritual self or our sexuality or our identity or our relationship with our neighbors or our comfort level with ourselves, whatever our issue is, but realizing that as people, as healthy, whole people, the goal has to be to address these things rather than run from them so that we can become self-actualized, right? And so how do you do that? And at the outset, we were saying, has visibility given us more opportunity to now empower ourselves? Because you need to see other people who can do it to be a role model just by living their lives in whatever capacity that is. So when many of us were growing up, we didn't see these kinds of opportunities. We didn't see Hillary Clinton talking about LGBT rights being a thing that our country is going to make a policy in terms of our foreign policy. I mean, these were things that they happen, and I see them, and I go, I can't believe that this is the world that we live in. But helping other people to be themselves oftentimes just involves you being yourself and being open to having that discussion, because people sometimes just want to talk. And sometimes people need to be able to put things in perspective. I'm going to give this will be quick. I have a niece. When I came out, within 2 months, 3 things happened. I came out, my father died, and my sister gave birth to a child who was born with birth defects. And I used to feel so sorry for myself because I too was married, I had a career, I had all this stuff, and I felt, why did this happen to me? I felt like such a victim. There was a pity party mentality. But I looked at this young child who couldn't make a sound. She didn't have a voice box. And so she would cry, and there would be tears, but there's no sound. And it makes you put things in perspective. And sometimes you need to get hit over the head with perspective to be able to really recognize things for what they are. So if I've done anything for the trans community or the LGBT community, is sometimes it's empowering them to have that perspective, to see the bigger picture, to take it out of just a sexuality or a gender identity or a physical fix to a problem. It's a wholeness problem that involves a lot of fixing and a lot of aligning, and that's the goal, to get to that top of being self-actualized.
Wow. Been a heavy-duty conversation. I feel like I'm in a therapy session, right? I have to go to my therapist this week. I want to thank all of you. And now we're going to go to questions from the audience. So let's get ready. We got a hand up here, but I want to make sure the mics are where they should be. So that gentleman right there, he shot his hand up. There we go.
Hi, I'm Winston Johnson, and almost everyone except Johnny talks about what a rough, tumble process it is to come out. And we all need to remember that that comes directly from fundamentalist religion. And fundamentalist religion funds tens and tens of millions of dollars worth of hate groups like National Organization for Marriage, Focus on the Family, American Family Association. And how do we counter that? Because all these vulnerable youth that are LGBT get those messages in their church, and they get it online and in the news and that kind of thing.
You want to take it?
Sure. Certainly pre-internet, it was an uphill battle. But I think with technology, there's been a lot of evil that have come with it. But one of the good things is that we don't have to have the war chest that we used to, right? Look what Dan Savage was able to do with his computer. Start a complete movement. He didn't have tens of millions of dollars. So that is one way, using social media, using technology to our advantage. I think, two, never forgetting, and I can't stress that enough, because I know in my own life, there are times in which I can see Modern Family on television, or see Jane on television, or talk to Don Lemon on the phone, and think that we're over here. And we might just be here, but there's still so many people here. We can never forget them here. And those are the young people that you're talking about. Letting that always be a primary focus of our national organizations, to never forget the grassroots, to never forget the small towns, that even though we're getting Emmys and Oscars and laws passed, that laws mean nothing to people if people don't obey them. It means nothing if no one takes those messages to heart and enact on them. So we can never forget those people. And I think using social media, using technology will help combat those tens of millions that have already been shored up. And I think one of those organizations got some tax issues anyway, so they may be coming down soon. So.
All right. Yes. Oh, Don Lemon! Woo! We got Don Lemon in the house. Whoa! Come on, let me get a microphone to you so we can.
I just want to say.
Oh, hold on 1 second. We're going to get a microphone to you.
You're gay now.
You can't escape that microphone.
This is not about me, it's about you guys, and I'm very proud of you. Thank you. Thank you for
We're proud
being
of you,
here.
Don.
I just want to say about resources for young people. Hi, Winston. Good to see you. About resources. This isn't about politics for me. Crisis by Mitchell Gold, the furniture maker, Mitchell Gold, deals with the very issue that you're talking about, and it's a resource and it's solutions. And that's all I want to say. This is about you. Keep going.
I love it. All right, we got another question. This gentleman right here. If we can bring a mic over, and we've got like mic runners who are going to run like heck. Oh. Mic. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Craig Washington, and I work at Aid Atlanta. My question is about stigma. One of the prioritized populations that we work with is young black gay men, and certainly stigma as a structural barrier plays an incredible role in terms of how they are prioritized or not prioritized and how they're valued in their homes, communities, and in terms of the impact on the people that make decisions about the services that impact their lives, so their access to service. So that being said, how do you think we can better, more effectively mobilize those good people that you spoke to, our allies, in addressing stigma? There was a recent article in a local newspaper that spoke very flatly about black people as being more homophobic, as if we're sort of genetically more homophobic, with no proof posited around that. And in the meantime, there are countless stories of acceptance that are just as quintessentially black as the George Jefferson dance. Acceptance of aunties loving their lesbian nieces and so on and so forth. So again, how do we mobilize those stories and those allies?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And so often people have stereotypes in their head that have nothing to do with the reality. And I've always said, being in the news media myself, that our purpose as journalists isn't to reinforce stereotypes, it's to shatter them and show the truth. And that's really our purpose. I don't care what subject you're talking about. There's a stereotype, and then there's the individual. And sometimes the reason why you have problems is that we have a tendency to deify and idealize certain people, and then we find out, oh, wait, those aren't the good people, those are the bad people. We're having a whole crisis now with coaching and allegations of pedophilia, where legends are being accused of the most horrific acts. And a lot of people can't get their mind around it because they can't marry those two images. And those people haven't gone to trial, and Jerry Sandusky deserves his day in court, but that's a perfect example of people not necessarily being able to perceive of that's not their idea in their mind of what a pedophile looks like, and yet he is facing 50 counts of child sex abuse. But I digress. Would you like to take that question?
Well, I'll take a shot at it. I mean, I think that it's tricky. I think there's a lot of strategies that have been used. I'm sure there are others that I'm not aware of, but I mean, I think that having stories told, experiences, I mean, that's a strategy a lot of LGBT organizations use, of getting real life stories that they can post on video, or making sure that we're getting our stories out. I also think that there's an education piece around working with the media. I think especially if you're in areas that are outside of major media markets, I think there's an education factor to make sure the right terminology is being used, to make sure that the right research has been shared with people who are covering these types of stories. And I think that's got to be a very deliberate effort. I think also thinking about, who are people who are speaking on behalf of these issues, and making sure that you're using those opportunities and training spokespeople that reflect a diverse group of people who are talking about the issues that concern, a larger LGBT group of individuals. So those are just some of the tactics that I think have been used successfully, but I'm sure others have more.
We're just about out of time, but I'm going to give a 30-second finale to Johnny. Where do you think we're going to be as a community? I don't know, in 100 years?
100 years? I have no idea.
Oh, well, on that note.
Well, you know, people grow and they change and they're stronger or weaker every single day. As I grow, I'm different every single day. So our community and our public acceptance will change every minute of every single day. So it's not so much changing the world. It's changing how you view the world. It's changing how you view criticism, how you view somebody putting their dukes up and wanting to fight you. Fight back. Like, just live. I hope that our community learns to push forward, live the way they see fit, and take no prisoners.
Well, I can't think of a better finale than that comment. Thank you so much, incredible panel! And thank you, audience. It's been a great conversation.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.